Master in Anatomy and Physiology with Indra Mani Pandey.
Welcome back, guys. This is the lecture about epithelial tissue. Okay. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about the main characteristics of epithelial tissues, and we're going to focus on the idea behind the classification. What are the main, you know, things that scientists consider before they classify errors, and what was the importance of classification. And you might think of what are these pictures for. These are the types of epithelial tissues. We're going to focus on next lecture, not today's lecture, okay? And I'll simplify these things in very simple ways so you can have better understanding what I'm talking about, okay? But in today's lecture, we're going to talk about characteristics and the the ways that scientists classified epithelial tissues, okay? So let's move on to another slide. As you can see here, epithelium tissues characteristics is the heading for this. And remember that these epithelial tissues are often known as epithelium tissue or epithelia. Okay, both means same. Okay, these that the terms, you can see different terms in different way. What does that mean? What are the difference? No, there is no difference between those, so you can use any terms. Okay, and usually epithelium tissues covers the exposed surfaces and lines the internal passageways and chambers. What does that mean? So exposed surfaces like your skin, right? Outside the layer of your skin is epithelium tissue, right? And the internal passageway, as you know, blood vessels, inner lining, also the endothelium, right? Internal passageways. So that's the another type of epithelial tissue, right? And it forms the barrier between internal body environment and the external body environment. What is the main idea behind this? The homeostasis. Okay, so it has a great function on that. Okay, so homeostasis, maintaining homeostatic balance in human body, these tissues play a great role. Okay, and the main characteristics of epithelium tissues are like polarity, attachment, avascularity, and regeneration. You already may know about polarity in chemistry. Polarity means something different ends, right? Like positive mean and the negative mean in the case of chemistry, right? But here might be different. We'll focus later. Attachment, there should be some kind of specific unique type of attachment. That's why it is a unique type of characteristic, okay? A vascularity. You know about vascularity. Vascularity means what? Supply of blood. Avascularity means maybe no supply of blood. Okay, we'll focus on that too. Regeneration. You might think of like regeneration. You can regenerate something. Oh, that's interesting. You can regenerate maybe this type of epithelium tissues. Who knows? We're gonna focus that one too. Okay, so let's start with polarity first. Um, when someone talking about polarity, you might think of like two ends, right? As I mentioned you in chemistry, you might thought of like positive in and negative in. Here you have apical basal polarity. What does that mean? Okay, so these cells, the individual cells, are usually have this apical surface in the basal surface. Basal surface is usually formed by basal lamina. Okay, the basal lamina forms the basal surface. This is basal surface, and this is the apical surface. In other words, if you want to just like simplify more, it has a upside and downside. Each individual cell has upside and downside. Upside is usually a free area, right? And the downside is attached to the basal lamina. Or okay, so that's the idea here. Okay, so you can say upside or downside, or you can say apical or basal polarity. Okay, and remember that the free surface toward the apical surface, you may see some kind of structure like this when you see in the microscope. those may be microvilli or cilia. Okay, those may be microvilli or cilia. All of the epithelial cells may not have that kind of structure, okay, but some of them do possess those cilia and microvilli. If you're talking about in respiratory system, you might see cilia a lot, and in the case of digestive system toward the intestine, you may see microvilli, okay, on those cells. Okay, that's the idea here. The polarity means two different surfaces, okay, the apical and the basal. That's it. That's the one of the main characteristic of epithelium tissue. Next one is attachment. Remember that these epithelium tissues are made or formed from different epithelium cells, right? And as I mentioned you, there are apical and the basal surface, and they are the continuous sheet, okay? They're connected by desmosomes, right? So that desmosomes allow to maintain the structural integrity, right? So that's the idea here. They have a tight junctions between those cells. And remember that these epithelial tissues are supported by connective tissue from the bottom. Okay, the first part of the connective tissue is called the reticular lamina, and in the epithelial tissue you have a basal lamina. Okay, this is a basal lamina, this is the reticular lamina. These two lamina forms a basement membrane. Okay, and someone asks you what is the difference between basement membrane and the basal lamina. Basement membrane is a combination of the basal lamina and the reticular lamina, while basal lamina is only the part of epithelium tissue. Reticular lamina is a part of connective tissue. Okay, that's the idea here. Now, another uh, characteristic of epithelium tissue is avascularity, or you can just say avascularity or just say avascular, right? They do lack blood vessel, but they are innervated. That's why you can sense the stimulus, right? For example, if you touch the hot part from your hand, by using your hand, what are you gonna feel? You're gonna feel like you're trying to remove your hand, right? That's the sensation, because your skin, the outer surface is still, even it is epithelium tissue, it is innervated. Okay, it is innervated. So that's the idea. It is innervated, but it does not have any supply of blood. Okay, they do get nourished from blood. Okay, where up to the blood supply is there. Okay, so the epithelium tissue, some epithelium tissues, uh, um, like many, you can say many epithelium tissues do not have supply of blood. Okay, they get food from the blood, but the all the blood cannot supply each individual epithelium tissue or epithelium cell. What happens is those things gonna diffuse, and they're gonna like taken by those cells which are not supplied by blood. Okay, that's the idea. That's the concept you need to be clear of. Even they are not supplied with blood, the food, the macromolecules can diffuse through different types of channels in different cells. Okay, that's the idea. And the final characteristic of epithelium tissue is regeneration. They have the capability to regenerate themselves. They have the very high regenerative capacity. You know, most of the things in the universe, they wear and they tear. Not everything, but in generally, if you just like keep using one machine, that's gonna break. We know that. We can fix that machine again by replacing some part, right? Regeneration is the same idea here. The tissues gets wear and they get tear. We can fix those. Okay, that's the capacity we consider as a regenerative capacity. Okay, for example, let's say you burn your skin, right? And this cell is died. Okay, now there is a stem cell population toward the basal surface. Okay, they have the capability to replace with another tissue to that damaged tissue. Okay, by the process called cell division. As you know, one cell is here, divides into two. That's the idea. And remember that these cells, the epithelial tissues, that the cells that form epithelium tissues, all the time they are like, exposed into, like, usually in the external surfaces. You may have rubbing and the friction, all the time. You lose, hundreds and thousands of cells each day. So they have to be replaced by some kind of capacity that the cells do possess. That is a regenerative capacity. Okay, that's the idea here. Okay, now we can classify epithelium tissues in different ways. The first classification is based on the number of cell layers. As you can see, if there is only one cell layer, then that is called a simple epithelia. If there are multiple layers, and that is called stratified epithelia. In simple epithelia, you have a basal surface and the nuclei are in the same level usually, right, at the same height usually. But in stratified, you may have nuclei in different level, and you're gonna have different layer. The idea here is how many layers you possess. Okay, so one layer, simple epithelia; multiple layers, stratified epithelia. That's the idea. That's the thing you need to know. Okay, and the another classification is based on the shape, what it looks like. Okay, we usually classified them in three terms, right? Squamous, cuboidal, and the columnar. Okay, as you know that squamous cells are usually flat cells. Okay, they may be simple or they may be stratified with different multiple layers. They can have multiple layers. Okay, another before I move on to cuboidal, what I want to mention is, okay, these are flattened, right? And they may be scale shaped, like this kind of shape too. They can be scale shaped, they can be flattened, but they might be simple or they might be stratified. Okay. Another type is called cuboidal. Cuboidal also may be simple or stratified. Okay, they look like cubic, like cube. They look like cube, and the nucleus is round, right? Nucleus is round, and they also may be simple or stratified. They look like cube and they have a round nucleus. Okay, that's the idea here. That's why we call them as cuboidal. Columnar. Okay, columnar means column, right? They look like column, right? And they are thin usually, and they are tall, and the nucleus is not usually round. Okay, it is like kind of like, this kind of shape, like in like egg shape. So that's the idea here. This is column like structure. So that's the classification based on shape. Okay, so that's the idea. So as I mentioned you earlier, based on number of cell layers, simple, one layer, stratified, many layer, based on shape, squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. Okay, the main function of epithelial tissues includes like physical protection, permeability, sensation, and specialized secretion. We're gonna see these things when we're gonna talk about these subdivisions of epithelial tissues. Okay, different types of epithelial tissues. We're gonna focus on these functions, and we generally took these functions from each type of those subdivisions. Okay, so that's the idea. But physical protection, like kind of skin permeability, right, allow diffusion kind of things, right? Like in the lungs, sensation like a taste in taste buds in your tongue, specialized secretions, right? Like secretory glands kind of scenario here. Okay, and the final one, what I want to mention today, is a glandular epithelium. It is one of the major type of epithelial tissue. It is a unique type of epithelial tissue. It has the capability to produce secretions, okay, and it forms glands. Okay, those glands may be exocrine gland or endocrine gland. As you know that the exocrine gland, they secrete their product onto body surfaces like skin. Okay, they do possess duct, they have a duct to just like supply those secretions. Okay, for example, mucus, oil, salivary gland, milk, and the sweat are the examples of exocrine. And if you're talking about endocrine gland, they do not have ducts. Okay, they just like dump their secretions in the blood so the blood can transport them. Okay, not only blood, you can have lymphatic fluid also. Okay, usually produce hormones, and hormones are the chemical messengers. For example, insulin is one of the example. You can talk about acetylcholine. Okay, acetylcholine also. Okay, those are the things. Now we can classify exocrine gland, based on two things: structural classification and the modes of secretion. Okay, as you can see, structural classification and modes of secretion. And the structural classification also based on two things. One is called based on duct structure, and the other one is based on secretory unit. Based on duct structure, you may have simple glands, which are usually unbranched duct, and you can have compound. Okay, the compound glands, which are usually branched duct. Okay, so usually one duct, no branch, that's simple glands. Compound glands has branched duct. You can have branching, like going this way, another branch, kind of like scenario. Okay, and the best in the secretory unit, you may have tubular if secretory cells forms tubules. Okay, and if the secretory cells forms tubes, then that is our tubular. If the secretory cells form small sacs, that is the alveolar. Okay, if the secretory unit forms tubular alveolar, both of the tubular and the alveolar mixed, okay, tubes and sacs, then that is called tubuloalveolar. Okay, that's the based on the secretory unit. And the final mode of secretion. So modes of secretion, they may be merocrine, holocrine, or apocrine. Merocrine, they usually secretes by exocytosis, like sweat gland and salivary gland. Okay, not salivary, but this is salivary, like salivary. I think I misspelled this one, salivary gland. Okay, so salivary gland, I think. Okay, I just messed up here. Okay, so merocrine gland, okay, secretes by exocytosis, just like they exocytosize, okay, everything. Holocrine, rupture, then secretes. Okay, they first rupture, then secrete. Okay, but here merocrine, they secretes by exocytosis. They do not rupture. Holocrine, they do rupture and they secrete. For example, sebaceous gland, skin, you can see that. Apocrine means accumulate their products, basically, but only just beneath the free surfaces only. Okay, the milk production is one type of the function of apocrine gland. Okay, so that's how we classify exocrine gland. So exocrine gland, we can classify structural classification, modes of secretion. In each classification, we can classify further. Okay, based on different ideas or based on different details that each gland poses. Okay, those subdivisions poses. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in next lecture. Bye-bye.
Please subscribe to see more videos regarding anatomy and physiology.